fund Planned Parenthood.
Privilege of aborting a child. Satan, he is the author of confusion, and
some shall depart from the faith, giving heed to seducing spirits and doctrines of devils.
Pretty controversial issue.
Very controversial. It's at all levels. Yes, we're back.
Back again. We're going to discuss a few topics today, but this time we're going to talk about the topic of abortion. Obviously, it's a pretty controversial issue.
Very controversial. It's at all levels.
Yes, and it has stood the test of time because it keeps popping up. It's not something that's technically been resolved. There's a lot on both sides, a lot of room for discussion. And I remember a couple of years ago, I remember it clearly because I kicked over a hornet's nest talking about it on social media, but there was Ireland got the right to have abortions in their country. And I remember the parades in the streets and flags waving, teary-eyed women. It was kind of sick in a.
Yeah, this is a very emotional issue for most people when they discuss it.
Yes, it's upsetting because that, at the other end of the celebration, there are lives being taken away to the tune of thousands, depending on where you are, millions in some countries. But obviously, most recently in France, they just became the first country to actually
place it in their
constitution.
Yes,
constitution. It's a constitutional right to have an abortion now, which is the first of its kind in a fairly large country in France.
And ironically, they're Roman Catholic countries as well. And the Catholic Church do not promote that as their doctrinal stance.
Correct. But somehow it's made its way to the highest ranks, and now it's been codified in law. So I know abortion being a global agenda. What are your thoughts behind the craziness that seems to be going on around the world?
Well, it may on the surface appear crazy, but it's really not. In reality, from a biblical perspective, there's natural and spiritual dynamics for all human behavior. Mm-hmm. And the natural component is that we look at legislatively, judiciously. We also look at individual rights. And then we also look at it spiritually. Spiritually, there are powers. The Bible speaks about dominions, spiritual wings in high places that control the affairs of men, or give them thought processes. The Bible speaks about how that in the last days, even with Christians, some shall depart from the faith, giving heed to seducing spirits and doctrines of devils. Mm-hmm. So what we have here is a spiritual and natural unfolding of end-time events.
Mm. So it's a tug of war that obviously knows no bounds and knows no borders. To me, there's a puppet master behind all of this. His name is Satan. I think that's pretty evident. But obviously, his impact in the world is pretty pronounced. Even in the church, even in places where he should be easily spotted, a lot of people are being deceived.
Don't recognize him,
as you just said. Yep.
Even the book of Daniel speaks about how that Daniel was wrestling with the prince of Persia. He prayed that it took 21 days to get his prayer answered and through. Mm-hmm. These powers control nations, and these nations also groups of nations. The puppeteers, in a sense, using secret organizations and groups they call the Illuminati, whatever you want to call them, they're globalists. And their goal is to create a new world order. So they worship Lucifer as God. And as a result of that, they're bidding. He's their spokespersons, both in legislative branch through the United Nations and also local, national, state governments. So it's no strange thing that this should be happening these days. And then at the individual level, like Alabama, recently passed a case concerning that a frozen embryo is a living person. Now, this throws a monkey wrench in the U.S. debate also. When does life begin?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think, you can look at it from a global perspective. You can look at it locally. You can look at it just in the United States alone. But I think I know we'll get to some of those topics in a short while, but just looking at what's going on in other countries where they're seemingly just now getting the privilege of aborting a child. Some won't even go as far as calling it a child. They just refer to it, by a scientific term to almost dehumanize it, which I know is just another tactic in my mind of Satan, how he seems to year after year, decade after decade, century after century, devalue human life in one way, shape, or form to accomplish his overall agenda, which is trying to usurp the order that God has, to usurp the structure that he has, just to
eradicate humanity.
Yeah, life exists.
The conquering group sets the rules. And since Great Britain and the Roman Catholic Church, through the imperialism, they set the rules using the United Nations as a global legislative body as their front. And the U.S. also is a leader of that particular element because it's located in New York City using the Rockefellers, like Planned Parenthood. Congress is in their pocket. They refused to defund Planned Parenthood, which started by Margaret Sanger, an individual who was dedicated to the proposition of eradicating minorities' babies.
Yeah.
But many have, they taped it, I guess, and they framed it, and they prepared to right now make it palatable for the ignorant masses by repeating lies over and over again. And those lies become tomorrow's prevailing truth. What lies? That is not a person. People regurgitate what they've been told. And so consequently, we have this ongoing tug of war, you stated, going on both in the U.S. and abroad. Even in China, 1972, one child per family. The United States, Roe versus Wade, 1972. There has been an orchestrated effort for all of this to be in coincide with one another. What do you think?
You're saying, ironically, the U.S. and their decision to allow abortions, China and their rulings that limited the number of children you could have in the family.
Eradicating the genocide on female babies, it's going on now. They just reversed that policy last year.
Yeah.
For 50 years, they have been male strong and female deprived.
Well, I don't think it's a surprise that those, and I didn't know that until today, that both of those came into light at the same time, approximately. But it does make sense because if there's one common designer of destruction, Satan, he is the author of confusion, and confusion takes place all around the world at the same time. And it does set out to accomplish.
And the masses just get caught up in the dynamics of their personal and they mimic towards them, but in reality, it's a big
They're not seeing the big picture.
That's absolutely right.
Right. What's a human? If this debate is so controversial, hopefully we can, at least when I say we, I mean humanity, can agree on what a person is. Where do you think that starts? And more importantly, how is that even controversial at this point?
Well, when you have personal issues that are intellectually dishonest, and you have science that is pseudoscience, is false science, put that together with a creative crisis that was created with the advent of the pill in the 1960s and the sexual revolution, and the aftermath conclusion was to create abortion to remedy the problem. You have a crisis created for humanity. And America has a psychosis. We have a psychological problem with as a human. It started with the Native American to manifest destiny, that they must, as General Pratt said in the 1880s in America, we must starve the Indian, and save the man. That you must kill the Indian to save a man.
Because they were savages. They were
savages. They were not human. That was justification to take all of the Native American land from coast to coast, from Atlantic to the Pacific, and the British and the Americans did that to this day. The Native Americans are still sitting on reservations, and who's advocating for them? I don't hear anyone crying out for the Native Americans who are still on their reservations, land stolen from them 400 years ago.
Yeah, well, you combine that with something like slavery, which I feel like we've heard this argument before as well. The 3/5 clause, the blacks were less than human. You had the ability to
God decision, their property. Blacks were the second category. See, in America, there was two categories historically that were not considered humans: Native Americans and people of African descent.
Well, when you say not considered human, by whom?
By the European conquerors, by those who still today take the reins of authority and rule in Europe through the United Nations, even in this country, even in our judicial system. In our judicial system, U.S. versus Cruikshank, that Supreme Court decision, 1876 said that blacks were not only, they had no rights, right? Even though the war was over, the Civil War, the 14th Amendment said they had rights. They had the right to vote. They had the right also to petition the government like everybody else, but they were denied the rights and they could be lynched without any due process. And as long as the state did not do it, any mob couldn't do that. And they did that for almost a century, after 1876 until 1975.
Yeah. So obviously, African Americans, Native Americans, overseas, you can go to.
It's overseas, say South Africa. South Africa and the United States are the only two countries that I know of in the whole world that identify people by their race. But then the third category that will come up would be unborn fetuses. The same arguments that was used for slavery by the white slave master
Or the Holocaust.
or the Holocaust, or that was used also by the white slave master for his property, the exact same arguments are used today for women. They're the new slave masters right now because life is a continuum. You see, in teaching psychology for several decades, your life is a continuum. At conception, it is a developing fetus. It is a developing person. Everything that fetus is at that point, at the conception, it takes about 23 years for a male and about 19 years for a female to go into a full phenotypic expression of that person, right? There is conception, there is
5 weeks to heartbeat, 10 weeks.
6 weeks. That's right.
development.
Something to Georgia, Ohio, the 6 week heartbeat bill that passed those there 2 years or so ago.
They finally get some sense when they turn 20. That's what I've been told.
Oh, well, congratulations. You made it.
Yeah.
I made it to a long time ago. But the reality is life is a continuum. You go through all the stages. There's prenatal development. They do surgery in the womb, prenatal development. But then back in, I think, 1991, the Clintons came out, this idea of partial birth abortion, whereby which they would actually deliver the baby about 75% out, suck the brain out, break, collapse, and then they take the baby out, say it was never alive. I mean, that is Holocaust style murder, right?
Well, I bring up the Holocaust because much like with Native Americans and blacks in America,
Genocide.
Even though they're slave
30
masters,
million.
yeah, slave masters could have babies with their
mulatto
slave.
children,
Yeah, and somehow
like Thomas Jefferson.
somehow these half non-humans and half humans or full humans were able to have children that
Amazing.
went on to look like everybody else.
As long as the white male did, but black males, you couldn't think about doing that. Marrying, all the laws concerning segregation and the prohibiting blacks from intermarriage, all those laws stay in the books in some southern states up until 1990.
Yeah.
So what we have a case whereby which hypocrisy at the highest degree.
And it's usually so people can ease their conscience. They can appease their conscience. They can, and I'm not even convinced that that's the reason, to be honest. But if enough people go along with it, because I think about the Holocaust and Hitler, the propaganda about Jews being less than human, and they were able to justify in their minds certain practices that allowed them to satisfy their lusts. Some of their lusts were for power. Some of the lusts were for scientific discovery. They tested on humans the same way they tested on lab rats. They put Jews in the same category as they did animals. And as a result, they used that as a means to allegedly further the growth of their culture, their nation.
Well, even America benefited from that.
Yeah.
And Operation Paperclip, they brought the German scientists to America. Almost 2,000 of them became part of the State Department, and their descendants are still here.
Yeah.
And so they came up to develop our chemical warfare programs. But, after a child is born, after birth, there is infancy, there's toddler, there is, adolescence, and then you go into adulthood, and then you go into middle age, and then you go into old age. In other words, life is a continuum.
Yeah.
It never stops. Only living things develop. So you don't develop the time you're born. You have to develop 10-month gestation. That's 40 weeks, full gestation. All right. And so this when you have science that is pseudo false, that they propagate this, people want to justify, as you said a moment ago, their conscience, believing a lie that they can maintain their sexual perversion, their sexual exploits, and also do what they want to do.
All right. I guess taking it from the very top, there is a global agenda behind the abortion movement. Is that a fair statement?
I think it's more than fair. In fact, most people take this subject on a personal level only. They don't see the macro version. They see the micro just themselves. And so you look at it only from a microscope, you can't see the big picture. But from the macro version, this has been going on for a long time, over a century, way before Planned Parenthood in 1929, Margaret Sanger. Way before then, in the 1880s, 1890s, Thomas Malthus and others began to espouse the idea of overpopulation on the planet. And they were planning with the Darwins and the Huxleys and many others, how can they reduce global population, especially for the unfit, genetically unfit, minorities and others that they would say so.
Now, I don't want to send you off on a rabbit trail right out of the gates, but they say the entire world's population can fit inside the state of Texas. If you stand shoulder to shoulder, there's enough room in Texas to fit the entire global population.
In Texas?
In Texas.
Texas. How about Jacksonville, Florida. I've heard one time. Texas is so large. Texas, boy, it takes what? Almost 11 hours to drive from Beaumont to El Paso and get out of the state, going on I-10. And that's going about 90 miles an hour. Speed limit to 80, by the way. And so, yes, Texas is a huge state.
It is.
It will swallow the entire world population.
So it seems like the world is quite large,
Right.
pushing 8 billion people, but it's also small enough to fit inside the state of Texas. Now, there's always people who will say, well, you know, we're going to have, there's not enough resources to go around. So we need to have plenty of room for the people who live here on the planet. But I just want to throw that out as a counterpoint, because I know a lot of people will say, well, you know, is overpopulation a big deal? Apparently people in the 1800s thought it was. And today it's still a topic of concern, and abortion is seemingly being set up as a solution to that.
It has been set up as a solution because they helped create the crisis. There is no overpopulation problem, in the world at all. Rather, what we have people who look at the global population and saying there are those who are least fit and most fit, those who are superior, those who are inferior. And the methods in the late 1800s with Charles Darwin, evolutionary theory, and then the concept of his cousin, Sir Francis Galton, was eugenics, population control for a global world order. So they look at population control, who will be the inhabitants of the earth, like the lifeboat theory, who should live, who should not die. And these theories have been propagated at schools of education back in the late 70s, 1970s, 1980s, and also now being populated today. More so because they believe that the genetically unfit should make room for the transhumanists, the new super race of humans, going back to Friedrich Nietzsche, who created the idea of a Superman from a super race. And this idea came from Helena Blavatsky back in the 1850s and 1860s, as well as she began to espouse the Aryan race theory, which Hitler and his cronies got a hold of either in the mid-1900s, and then as a result, they espoused it under Nazism. So racial science is a real issue in the world today.
So when you look at the statistics around abortion, you know, most of them, an overwhelming majority, over 90%, 91% to be exact, are done out of convenience, or you can put these in categories of convenience. Women are purporting that they're either not ready to have a child, they can't afford to have a child, they didn't want to. Of the percentage that say they're just not ready, that's a quarter, 25%. 23% they said they just can't afford a child. 20% said they didn't want a child at all. And then another 8% said they just weren't ready to be a single mother. These are all the reasons they gave for why they had an abortion. Now, the one R word that gets thrown out, you know, what happens if someone takes advantage of me sexually and I end up with a child that I did not want? That equates to about less than a half of a percentage. Statistically, you know, not that large of a group, obviously. Every instance of that category is obviously a life-changing moment. And those women should be protected and taken care of more than anyone, to be perfectly honest. But for the overwhelming majority of the people who are having abortions, you know, it is truly a matter of convenience.
Well, convenience, let me put another perspective. The data and statistics that you're given is primarily for single women. Married women generally don't do that. So the data is not reflective of reality. It's not a woman's right. In fact, a woman cannot get pregnant by herself. Mm-hmm. In reality, it takes a man to help a woman or some another, whether it's surrogate or in vitro, other form of artificial insemination, so she get pregnant. A woman cannot have a child by herself.
You need a sperm.
You need a sperm.
Absolutely.
All right. And so it's the male that determines the sex of the child. And since it's the male that determines the sex of the child, and a woman cannot get pregnant on her own, the male is 50% just as responsible for that child as she is. But yet, she gets the right to make determination whether it lives or dies through infanticide. Mm-hmm. The only question I have is that if she chooses for the child to live and a man cannot participate in whether or not she have abortion or not, because it's her body and her right, then why does the male held with liability of paying child support for her property, her body?
Her choice.
Her choice. That's inequity. That's not due process. and putting the elder's responsibility on the male.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not fair. Either he is or he isn't. It's not her property. In fact, it's not even there. It's not even part of her body.
Yeah, actually,
it's not an organ in her body. She has a placenta, which is a organ that grows only during pregnancy.
And all the instructions for this organ that grows within a woman's womb,
right,
as they're developing,
the life support system,
that actually comes from the baby itself. It's not the woman's body that tells the body how to grow this womb, to grow this entire system that cultivates and helps provide for this life as it's progressing and maturing, as we talked about. Another interesting, because a lot of people like to compare a developing baby to a parasite, like it's just taking from the mother, draining her resources, this and that. When in actuality,
well, how about this here? If it's a parasite in the womb, and when she takes the baby out of the womb and she breastfeeds, it's no longer a parasite, because you do not nurture your child while it's out of the womb. You not take care of it, you'd be charged with murder, killing your child. Yep. So we can't have it both ways. Here's the oxymoron associated with this whole argument. If a man is driving a car, he's going 90 miles an hour, jumps over the median, smacks right into a female driving a car who's pregnant, and then kill both the mother and the child, the male is charged now with 2 counts of vehicle homicide. Mm-hmm. If it's not a living being, if it's not a thing, then why is he counted with 2 charges? Should only be 1 charge, just a murder of the mother, homicide because of the car accident. But the person is charged now with 2 counts of vehicle homicide. We can't have it all these ways. It should be one way or the other. The laws aren't just, they're not fair, and people are not looking at that perspective. What do you think?
It's always been that way as well, because there are some Christians who believe it or not, can make way, can make room, can justify abortion in some cases. And I look no further than, in the Old Testament, there were examples of, you probably heard, what happens if 2 men get in a fight and one of them hits a pregnant woman and she falls down and loses her child, or goes into labor prematurely. There was a whole hierarchy of laws and
that
rules that governed exactly mm-hmm. that, because even in those days, by God's commandment, there were things, the woman and the child that was developing was considered a human, was considered a life. If a life was lost, it was up to the father, ironically. The wife and the husband would come together to have a child. The wife gets injured, loses the baby. It was actually up to the husband to determine what the penalty would be. And then it would have to be ruled either fair or unfair by the priest and the judges that they had those days. But, it just goes to show that even in those days, without all the modern technology and what we know, they knew less about what's inside of a mother's womb than we know today. And somehow what we know today still isn't sufficient enough for a lot of people who are making these rules.
They both equal partners, and both will be held accountable to God for the outcome of their child, regardless who makes that decision. One may or may not be persuaded in their mind about the issue concerning property rights concerning slavery, and also the issue concerning aborted babies. But there is a chart that is very common, if anyone take time to do some research, a direct parallel between the slave owner in the South and the women today put themselves in that same position. It's the issue of property. And that issue says that the state has no right to tell me what to do with my property. That's the exact same issue that was raised by the slave owners concerning when South Carolina seceded from the Union, said the United States could not tell me what to do with my body or my property.
Nothing new under the sun.
Are you serious about that? They don't invent no new lies, huh?
No, I mean,
if the suit works, just warm it up and start all over again, right?
Well, yeah, especially if it's Satan. He doesn't have to invent anything new. He's the only one, the only constant. I'm not surprised. It's a what's the best way to put this? If something is, if you have to go out of your way to be intellectually dishonest, it doesn't matter what the topic is. It doesn't matter what the subject matter is.
The verse says in the Bible in Titus, unto the pure, all things are pure, but them who are defiled, everything is impure. Even the conscience is defiled. They cannot discern good from evil because of their paradigm.
That's a great reference.
They don't want to look at the truth because they want to justify their lies.
Yeah. You can defend any lie if you are dishonest.
Disingenuous.
Disingenuous, intellectually dishonest. And I think the reason that there seems to be this clear pattern, I'm sure you got some examples. It's not a surprise.
How about another example? It's an economic issue. The woman, you said earlier, woman cannot afford to have a child. Mm-hmm. It's a burden upon them. You know what?
23%.
Well, because of the cotton gin, there was a need for slaves, more of them, because they can process the cotton much quicker.
Okay.
All right. And so it was the Southerners said, we're damned if we do, we're damned if we don't. It is a moral dilemma. Well, we have to do this, because if we don't, the parallel is that we would not be able to survive in the South, because mother cotton is our industry.
I've heard this before.
You have.
And when it comes to illegal immigration, we have to have illegal immigrants in, because no one wants to do the hard work and pick the harvest or harvest the crops and work in the field.
Exploiting people.
Yeah. So it's a convenient excuse. Sounds good. Yeah, I'm not even convinced that it sounds good, but people certainly like to use it, and it passes the test for, unfortunately, too many.
Well, also understand that slavery was a sexual issue as well, because the wenches or the slave women were their master's property. And as mulatto children running the yard looking like master, they had total control over their black slave women's bodies, all right? The men, if they thought about it, they would be lynched, beaten, and killed, right? Mm-hmm. Black men. But black women were the slave master's exploits. Mulatto children came about. All right. And so as a result of that, Thomas Jefferson, for example, has really got screwed up. He, with Sally Hemings, he had at least 5 children from Sally. Sally went to England with him. That was his wife, mistress. Mm-hmm. And also with Thomas Jefferson, Sally Hemings was his wife's half-sister. Mm. And so it's really screwed up the sexual thing. And today, when sex is screwed up, the family gets screwed up. Like today, with incest and everything else, and the problems that happen in the family, like with Jefferson and everything else to some degree, the whole society, when the family goes amok and they do not live by God's holy standards, then every type of situation imaginable will come up, and the state have to deal with.
And it's easy to justify if you're not playing by any set of rules or guidelines. I think that's the one element that's missing in all this. There has to be a standard, and it seems like that standard is being overlooked. If you can't agree on, not to introduce another topic, but people today have a hard time agreeing on, the definition of a woman. Of course, you're not going to be able to agree on the definition of a child. If you can't even
a man in the 60s, am I not a man? That's what we wore. Yeah. Big size and yeah. Am I not a man? All right. Mm-hmm. Today, what's a woman? All right. I have not seen too many men have the menstrual cycles yet. Nor have I ever seen a man having a baby. Or through his pelvis.
You can if you redefine the terms, and all of a sudden
define them all you want.
Right.
That's called delusion.
Exactly.
What happened when the whole nation's caught up in a psychosis like right now? All right. And the psychosis for the purpose of pleasure, the pursuit of pleasure. In the Old Testament, people would sacrifice their children to the fire. Mm-hmm. The god of pleasure, Moloch, Astaroth. Today, most people don't realize that the abortion of the firstborn child is to sacrifice their firstborn child to Satan. And they don't realize the spiritual components is going on. In the occult realm, they really homage that. Mm-hmm. In fact, they consider in the feminist movement, the radical feminist movement, that's a sacrament that's as demonic and as demonic as possibly can be. But most people never get to that level. They don't understand how they're caught up in this here because of their own pursuits and don't understand what is happening. But God can't forgive an individual that does that. That's where his grace comes in. Amen. It's not the unpardonable sin.
Exactly.
It is a great sin.
Exactly. I think that's why you see the weeping in the streets of Paris. People, to them, it's a sacrament. It's I forget the term. Out in California, they were doing it was called like shout your abortion, and they had this big movement. It was like a woman's empowerment thing. This is the day I killed my child, and as if it was a good thing, as if it was right, as if it wasn't traumatic.
And that people don't understand the brutality associated with that. But God still can forgive one no matter what they've done. Mm-hmm. And a woman does not have to suffer from post-abortion stress syndrome. PASS, mm-hmm. right? A lot of women have nightmares and dreams associated with that. God can forgive you. You can be healed in Jesus' name.
Amen.
When you look at all the things that are happening, if you really want to follow any social, political issue, follow the money trail. Mm-hmm. If you follow the money, then you might see that it's not funny. If you follow the money, you may determine and understand that you may be used as a pawn in the overall scheme of things to be manipulated for purposes that you may not know about. For example, aborted fetuses are really needed for stem cell research and scientific investigation. They need the babies. Mm-hmm. They need the material. And when women abort their babies, they're donating that, who is a combination of the progenitory line of the mother and the father now is being given, to the scientific community for research.
Yeah. And of course, there's lots of sob stories in cases, it's serving a greater good for a greater purpose. This thing sacrificed its life for the benefit of society.
But if it had no life, then it was just a thing, right?
But they won't go as far as saying it's not life because they can't
justify
under a
that.
microscope. Yeah, it's moving. It's developing.
It's developing. But with my wife, your mother had 6 children, and we saw y'all moving in the womb.
Not all at once.
Okay. Yes, one at a time.
Clarify that.
So as a developing baby, right, that people will be sever their conscience, that they cannot receive and understand truth, and also very vile. The corporations right now are paying women to abort their babies so that they can spend less time in maternity leave, and they're going for that. Mm-hmm. And women are marching, like 3 years ago in Washington, D.C., women are watching, but their whole body dressed as one big vaginal flower, best way to put it.
Yeah.
And it's walking in the streets, vulgar and vile and nasty. All right, put it that way. Mm-hmm. So their sexual organ can't tell me what to do with my body. But you know what? Number one, when they die, they discover that there's something after the grave, and their body, man, is a trichotomy. He has a body, a soul, and a spirit. And when this flesh decays, and when you rot, right, and you go to your grave, what happens to your spirit? You see, man can give birth to the body, you're right, but man cannot give birth to the spirit. That spirit got to go back to God. And that person, mom and dad, get an account for the child whose spirit that they terminated. It's not just the body.
You talk about the great point, by the way, the body, the soul, and the spirit. What's the difference between the spirit and the soul?
The spirit, of course, it lasts forever, all right? And the spirit is the essence of the man. That's the heart of the man. And then God can make your spirit born again. That's what born again Christian mean. Renew your spirit. But the soulless realm is the intellect. That is the 5 gates. It gives you access to interface with the natural world. Your eyes, your ears, your taste, your touch, and your hearing. You can interact and process information. If you had no soul, you could not think. You could not communicate. You'd not know. You'd be a total just comatose person with no sense of reality.
Right.
But you have a spirit that still lives on. All right. And the body, it dies. The flesh dies. Mm-hmm. The soul has consciousness, but the spirit is eternal. And God will have to give, the parents have to give an account for that. But with the corporations that are also working with men and major, I guess, organizations like Planned Parenthood, like Zero Population Growth, that committee that started the Malthusian model, population reduction, for purpose of eugenics. It goes right along with the idea that they're using medicine now for human beings, developing medicine as well as using for food flavors. They say, right, there's debate how much of flavor coloring is used from fetal tissue, as well as cosmetics right now. For the skin, it used also very helpful for this area. So it's a $1 billion industry today. And most people are not aware that their body parts from their babies are being harvested, as parts of the organs for research and development, and for medicine, as well as for cosmetology.
Yeah, all types of testing going on in the scientific community. I feel like it shouldn't even be considered part of science because it's pretty atrocious what's going on. But I'm always reminded of Jeremiah 1:5. It talks about, before I formed thee in the body, I knew thee.
That's right.
And the Lord has a personal connection with any and every single person who's ever been formed, and on their path to becoming a fully functioning, reasoning adult. There's many stages in between, which we just talked about, but he places a heavy emphasis on the importance of life in the womb. Man, whether they agree with it or not, they can't reason their way out of the fact that
man cannot determine tomorrow whether he'll live or die. Yeah. Man does not know he'll even wake up tomorrow. However, God, the author of all flesh, the author of all souls, he's the one that established from the foundation world everyone that lives. And right now, we just pray, let my baby live, right? Let my children live. I will help you take care of them. There are people willing to adopt your children, to assist you in the process. I know you might have been a victim. I know you might have problems, but God is forgiving God. He's able to help you overcome yourself, overcome the sin in your life, and overcome you being a victim by others as well. God is good.
You said it best. This is not it's a This isn't even a political issue. This is a matter of the heart. This is a spiritual matter.
Absolutely.
More importantly, and if you're not a Christian, if you're not a believer, it's still a morality thing. And I think that's when people have to learn to spot the difference between the two.
The Bible speaks about in 1 Timothy 3:2, it says, "For men should be lovers of their own selves, covetous, boasters, proud, blasphemers, disobedient to parents, unthankful, unholy, and without natural affection." It's amazing that what's happening right now is happened before. The Bible speaks about that when Christ was born, there was a decree sent out by Herod to kill all male children 2 years of age and younger. All right. Before Christ, though, it happened again. Before him. Moses was born. A decree was sent out by Ramses II to have all the Jewish male children killed. All right. And the Bible called these male children, both with Moses and with Jesus, the man child. Now, few can ever get to this point. Even the church have no idea what I'm talking about. But for those who do, I'm speaking to you directly. What's happening? That the last days abortion movement is a movement by the Antichrist and Satan to kill the man child, delivers that God will use in the book of Revelation in the last days. What do you think about that, Julian?
So rewind a little bit. In Moses' day,
Okay.
there was a promise of a deliverer that was going to come and emerge out of Egypt. Now we know Pharaoh, he had his own motives. He understood that the Jewish people were multiplying and they were starting to exponentially multiply. And he was starting to get threatened by them. He got a little concerned and paranoid and started enslaving them. They were once previously ushered in with open arms because of all the hard work that Joseph did. And we know about the whole story of Joseph in the 7 years of prosperity and 7 years of...
And he saved Egypt from his own calamity, from famine, his dreams, his vision. 400 years they was in Egypt and the tide turned.
Almost overnight. And then next thing you know, God's people are in bondage and there was a deliverer that had to free them out of that. Now, something tells me Satan caught wind of this some way, shape, or how.
Okay.
And that was part of the reason Pharaoh was prompted to do what he did. Then you fast forward to Herod, as you said, there was a promise of a deliverer coming out of Israel.
The Messiah.
The Messiah.
He would not deliver people naturally like Moses. He would deliver people from their sins and deliver them from the bondage of what? Satan. In the Old Testament, they had no way to deal with devils, but by the power of the Holy Ghost, in the New Testament, devils can be cast out of people.
Yeah. And Pharaoh was like a type of the Antichrist where truly had people in bondage as well.
Correct.
A type of Satan and how he operates in the natural. But yeah, to your point, here we are living in right before the Lord is scheduled to return. If I had to pull up my iPhone here, I can check my watch. It's soon and very soon.
Mine's not either.
Modern kids. But yeah, there's a promise of a deliverer coming soon, and it's going to come.
This is Christ's second coming. This time he's not coming back as a baby. He's coming back with the man child. These are the mature sons of God who will deal with the Antichrist, all those who are in apostasy, all the whole world government. The Antichrist should be the head of the new world order. He will also bring back sacrifice and murder Christians and so on and so forth, just like it did in biblical days.
And this is all referenced in the book of Revelation.
In the book of Revelation. Is Rome revitalized? United Nations even used the symbol of ancient Rome. The UN olive branch is the symbol of ancient Rome. Just filled in with the nations now. But Rome has now conquered the world. They're preparing for a global Caesar, a global Tsar, a global Kaiser. Roman, Italian, Caesar, a world leader, world dictator is about to come, and the United Nations, the World Court, which is the global judiciary body, and also the global Caesar, which is this U.S. Secretary General, one day after World War III will consolidate its powers. All nations shall be dissolved to form 10 regional governments. And Christ says that the Antichrist system was started in the 1970s. To kill all the innocent babies. Rachel weeping for her children is happening again, like with Moses, like with Jesus, and it's happening now. This is the big spiritual picture what's happening in preparation for the end times and the fulfillment of the book of Revelation.
Now, you said it 3 times now, this man-child, this mature Christian who's going to or group of Christians that are
group
going
of
to
Christians.
emerge from the church. Their main
the
purpose.
church.
What is their purpose?
The churches is
Not the church's purpose. What is the purpose of this man-child?
The mature sons of God, Romans chapter 8, 18 through 22, their primary purpose is to provoke Israel to jealousy, deliver natural Israel, because the U.S. is going to turn against Israel. It's got to deliver the church. We have 45,000 different denominational sects. The book of Revelation chapter 1 and 2 and 3 all deal with God bringing judgment upon the church. He's going to come and clean his house.
Judgment's going to begin in the house of the Lord.
That's what Peter said. We will first begin in the house of God, and the righteous are scarcely saved, but chance that the sinners and the ungodly. He's going to clean his church up. There will be one church in the end, not 45,000 different denominations. All those who are partakers of the Queen of Babylon, the mother of harlots, the apostate churches that exist in the world today will join the Antichrist. It'll be Jesus Christ versus the Antichrist. It's going to be the angels of God versus all Satan, his demons. It's going to be light versus darkness. It's going to be kingdom against kingdom. All this is about to culminate right now. In book of Revelation chapter 12, verse 12, it says, woe be unto the heavens of the earth and the sea, for the devil's come down, having great wrath, because he knows had but a short time.
Yep.
He's trying to kill the man-child, but he never does. He didn't kill Christ, didn't kill Moses, but the innocent are always killed.
Yeah.
The innocent are always killed.
I don't think you made any of this up. Obviously, you've read this from the Bible.
For the past 45 years, I've been studying this.
Yeah, and everything you just told us has been, it was written down 2,000 years ago. So
Absolutely.
If it was written 2,000 years ago, Satan has a role to play in this. He has read the script before we even caught wind of the script. He's been planning for this. He knows what the end looks like, and he's trying his best to snuff out these deliverers that are going to come from the church to persecute.
He won't be. Gates of hell shall not prevail against the church of God. And Isaiah 46:10, it says, God declared the end from the beginning. The script is here. What role will you play? Get ready, because the Lord is coming, even because of the abortion movement.